DW Africa Link.
A recent World Bank report has delivered a stark reality check for Zambia. Poverty levels are rising, with more citizens now living below the poverty line. Despite the country's rich natural resources and economic potential, many Zambians struggle to afford basic necessities. This troubling trend raises urgent questions about the effectiveness of economic policies, wealth distribution, and social safety nets. What are the root causes of this growing hardship, and what can be done to reverse it? Stay tuned. My name is Josey Mahachi. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter from Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Many Zambians are unhappy and in agreement with the new World Bank report, which ranks Zambia among countries whose economies have shrunk. The report shows that poverty has become deeply entrenched over time, as more than 64% of the population lives below the poverty line. For a discussion on this, I'm joined by DW correspondent Kathy Short in Lusaka and Dickson Mwansa, the program officer at the Josey Center for Theological Reflection, which works on economic justice issues and monitors conditions in communities. I'll start with you, Kathy, as our correspondent and as a journalist on ground. Are you surprised with the findings of the report in regards to your country, Zambia?
Not at all, because we have been seeing this in our daily lives and also, in our discussions with local communities, and also seeing the impact of the economic difficulties that people are going through. And this report actually covers the period 2010 to 2022. And at the moment, with what we are going through with the energy crisis, the drought, and now the floods, the situation could even be much, much worse.
Right. And just to come to you now, Sir Dickson Mwansa, you are the program officer at the Josey Center for Theological Reflection, and your organization works on economic justice issues as well as monitoring conditions in communities. With this report, do you agree with what the World Bank has just discovered?
Thank you so much. Yeah, just like Kathy has indicated, the report is not a surprise to us as JCTR, because last year even the government through the Zambia Statistics Agency released a report which we call the Living Condition Monitoring Survey, where the poverty levels have increased, and our interaction with the community have also revealed some severe impoverishment to the people that we work with, and they have shared their new lived experience, how they are losing trust in the economic condition and hoping that one day things will get better. But looking at the period that the report covered, and for them to have a better outlook of how the future looks like, it's really a concern for us as JCTR. We agree to the findings of this report because the experiences at community level are very there and a concern to us, even as we advocate for better pro-poor policies.
Right. But please just take us through the findings that you've been seeing in these communities, Dickson. You work with communities, and especially when it comes to poverty levels. Can you just tell us what exactly is going on, and which age groups are lacking? What are people doing about it?
Thank you. So much of it in communities, of course, the observation might differ from rural and urban areas. But speaking for urban areas, we do conduct what we call the satellite home survey, where we just look at the average earnings and also look at the cost of living among between towns in Zambia. And we've noted that there's low income among households in Zambia. Hence, now they have to cut on expenditure. So you'd find that a house now, instead of having 3 meals per day, they have to have a meal maybe once a day. and they have to find other alternatives of what they'll feed on the rest of the day. So you'd find that there's households are now resorting to cutting expenditure. And from our point as JCTR, we do advocate for not only households having basic needs, but also nutritious needs for their well-being. But you'd find that households will focus on one aspect. Maybe it could only be accommodation and a meal. And not only that, you would also find that the crime rates within communities, especially in urban areas, is quite increasing, and the concern is happening even during daytime, where youths are involved in just to cater for their living, engage in crime activities. Yeah.
Right. But when you observe these things as JCTR, then what do you do about it? You find that people are lacking accommodation, people have no food, the crime rate is increasing. What does your organization then do when you discover this?
So our organization has a specific program which we call the socio-economic development, and that under the project or the program, we focus on interrogating some of the major drivers of maybe the cost of living and advocate for proper policies to government. And at a monthly basis, we do release a bulletin or a statement which we call the basic needs and nutrition basket, which gives the cost of living, and we constantly engage government on our findings to ensure that they put in specific measures that we feel can be able to cushion the rising negative impact of poverty or the experiences that people are going through.
Right. Now, Kathy, back to you. Your observations with regards to the overall economic situation in recent years compared to now in Zambia.
The situation has been getting worse in the past years. We've seen also lack of limited jobs in the Zambian economy. Also, there are less earnings in terms of salaries and wages for people. The average salaries here, Josey, we are talking about something like 50 to 100 euros, for instance, in a month. If even, you are lucky, one is lucky to even get that amount, monthly, that is. So you find that a lot of people, the majority of people are earning very, very low salaries. And then also we find that poverty is more pronounced in rural areas than in urban areas. And in urban areas, it's about 64%, whereas in rural areas, it's about 78%. And we have reached middle income country during the time of 2010, 2013. But this is really going backwards as a country. We have made, I think, a lot of losses in terms of the poverty journey. And also there are so many factors, which we can look at, that are causing this. The energy costs for the past 3 years, or 4 years, in fact, we have fuel prices being increased every month. So anything that touches or hinges on, on energy causes a ripple effect in so many other sectors. So meaning that the cost of bread, the cost of, food, staple food, mealie meal, maize meal, which is eaten by the majority of people here, has actually tripled or quadrupled in the past 4 years. So really, we are seeing the situation getting worse in Zambia.
Right. But, as someone who's been following the Zambian story closely, Kathy, it's quite surprising because I remember when it was President Lungu, these were the same stories that people were complaining about, that we want change, we want things to get better, everything is expensive. And then came President Hakainde Hichilema, and the world thought things would be different. So is there a difference, or things are actually like nosediving, getting worse in Zambia?
They are actually nosediving. At the time, yes, when President Lungu was in office, things were hard, but now they're even much, much harder, than they were before. Everything is expensive, and things have doubled, like I said, or quadrupled in some cases. Houses, accommodation is becoming more expensive, while people's salaries and wages remain stagnant. And I think also the issue to do with the country's huge debt has played a role in this. We do not have so much money, to go for everyone. And then also the natural disasters. So there are a number of combinations, but I can confirm that things are actually worse off than during Lungo's time.
Right. Now back to you, Dickson, just to find out from you what the current food basket for a family of 5, let's use the number 5, in Lusaka, and what the average salaries are, and also just to know how people are surviving on a day-to-day basis.
One of the coping mechanisms or survival modes that people have adopted, one among others, is people probably mostly in the rural areas are now becoming more reliant on government support, which government support through social cash transfer. There's now what we are calling the cash for work. So there is such a program, but the target or the beneficiaries are very limited compared to the poverty levels.
Well, how do you qualify to get these grants?
We've got the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services that is in charge of enlisting people in the programs. They assess the vulnerability of a household. So there's what they call child-headed households, women-headed households, people with disability, and also look at the level of vulnerability that they are in, then they'll be able to put them on that program.
Mm-hmm. If Kathy, you can also just elaborate on this for me, just to understand how people are coping also with these challenges, especially when it comes to women. Women are the drivers of the homes. The stress is more on them to ensure that the children have eaten before the husband comes back from work. Most home households are like that, and she has to make sure that there is food.
When we talk about the average amount that one needs, according to the current food basket that the JCTR has released, that's about $390 in the range of also about 300 euros per month that needed for a family of 5 to survive. And that survival, Josey, is on basic needs only. We are not even talking about the luxuries. So just your basic needs, food, shelter, and the like. And then also when it comes to women, we've seen a lot of women-headed households in Zambia, and also women getting into economic activities on the streets, in the markets, and also in the workplace. So you find that the women are actually carrying, the brand, and it's almost like poverty has got a face of a female. That is very, very clear to see. Every day you are walking on the streets, you see so many women, waking up as early as 4 a.m. to fritters, to go and buy merchandise to resell so that they can look after their families. So it's really, really hard for them.
It's not just Zambia, Kathy. I've heard from many women across Africa. It's like poverty is meant more for women. You see it more on their faces because they're out there carrying baskets, carrying things on top of their heads just to make sure that the family also survives. And it's quite sad, especially whenever this happens. But Dickson, let's remove your cap as the director of JCTR, as a man. Tell us, how do you feel when such happens, when poverty has to be aligned more with women than with you men?
That's an interesting question. For women with their empathy, they wouldn't want to see a home not having certain needs in a house, and they would make effort for. And it's not the easiest position to be in for a man. Sometimes when you cannot find a job and you are trying your very best to find something to do and you can't find it, sometimes you engage in less economic activities. You'd find men just drinking the whole day, seated by a drinking place.
So the little money that we're supposed to be buying meal now, you'd rather just sit and drink.
Yes, and that's really a problem. And women, it's now dawns on women to be able to shoulder on and see through the family, which is not a good thing, I would say. And it's important that it might be good that men also begin to take up a proactive role, even in the situation that we currently face as a nation, where even finding just a piece work can be a bit of a challenge for a man. A woman would go to a seed market and do one or two things, but a man, with his pride and other things, they would rather wait. Maybe something would show up, but it's something that has to be looked at.
Who do you think should look at that? Should it not start with you to ensure that men in Zambia change their mindset?
Yes, definitely. It begins with me, and it begins with all of us to be able to see that we need to hold hands together, even in times of uncertainties like we are in right now. And yeah, there's need for a change of a mindset within our culture system, because men have been always looking for certain way. There's a certain work they feel they can do, in as much as when they're faced with difficulties. So I think there's need for a change of mindset towards that approaches.
Now we've talked about all the challenges why World Bank had to put out this report about Zambia, but what do you think should be done in Zambia to reduce these poverty levels, Dickson?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so when you go further into the report, I was able to attend the launch of the report when it was being launched, and the report re-emphasizes agriculture as a promising option for poverty reduction. And in Zambia, 80% of our population, I would say, are employed in the agricultural sector. But you'd find that they are still at subsistence level and not much involved at medium or large scale, where they can now engage in some mechanized farming, which will increase their income or increase their output, and how ultimately be able to feed them. So I think government has to be a bit deliberate to ensure that the agriculture sector is put as a priority, both in the policy aspect, in the implementation of the programs that they have in the agriculture sector, as well as broaden up the program to ensure that much of the rural areas who depend on this sector of the economy see the benefit out of this, that even when they are faced with challenges, at least they are able to adapt to the changing environment of climate change and be able to produce for their survival than depend on government always. Then there is also the aspect of job creation. Of the past 4 years, we've seen job creation being focused more on public service. Most of the jobs that are being created, it's by government, and very limited jobs are being created by the private sector. The private sector has been inactive in job creation, and I feel if government can take a proactive measures to revamp the private sector involvement in the economy, and not only them taking a lead role, but they invest more either in policies, favorable policies that enhances local private sector. I'm deliberate about saying local, because when it's local, we are also assured of certain economic benefits to accrue to the economy. So I think that's one of the critical areas. And last, in the short term, I know like Kathy had spoken about the fuel challenges we are facing, the climate change we are facing, and we had drought last year, which has made it very difficult for people to afford security. I think government should not shy away from taking responsibility, at least providing subsidy, especially to critical commodities of the economy. For example, fuel. It's one thing that when the increase is done like now we increase, the fuel is changed on a monthly basis. We have observed from our satellite home survey and our basic needs and nutrition basket that it is the main driver of the changes of the cost of living. So if government is able to put in place even subsidy to a certain programs that have got an impact on the cost of living to the people, so that they are cushioned from the rising cost of living. So I would say that government should not rule out subsidy in as much as there's debt repayment. There is a lot to handle right now, but we also need the survival of the Zambian people.
Right. Now, Kathy, what is the government saying about this poverty situation?
The government, through the Information and Media Minister, Cornelius Mwetwa, assured that the government was actively working on measures to reduce the cost of living. Mwetwa acknowledged that both the load shedding, which is power rationing, and the high cost of living were major concerns for the government. And he particularly said that especially this year, we might see things getting better. But of course, critics are quick to say that the government hasn't done so much, and they've heaped the blame on them, that they haven't done much for the private sector, the local, economic sector also being helped, the small and medium scale enterprises, that they've been neglected. And also we are able to see this through, the different places where we go to, where locals are engaged in business. So there's a feeling that government is not doing so much. And just a couple of days ago, citizens were demanding that government addresses them on the cost of living. So that goes to show how much importance this topic has at the moment in Zambia.
All right. Now, Dickson, as we conclude our discussion, what lessons can Zambia learn from the neighboring countries, the region of SADC, in terms of, I don't know if there's any country that you think Zambia can learn from, be it South Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, or this is a situation happening in the whole of SADC?
Yeah, like you said, SADC countries. I think the lessons are many. They might not have maybe yielded certain results, but there are things that you can see are working, and you're able to adapt them depending on the context and the issue that you are facing. I think particularly for Zambia, one lesson that we can learn probably from South Africa is the approach of probably having a private sector-driven economy, where the private sector is able to create jobs for its citizens. They are able to increase production where people can be employed. I think that example would be very vital for Zambia to be able to adopt and see how best we can be able to create an environment where the private sector thrives and creates jobs for our people, other than we, the government, creating the jobs ourselves year in, year out. The capacity of government is very limited. That is one of the recommendation that I think can be adopted, in as much as there are also poverty issues in there or concerns with unemployment, but I think the private sector is a lesson Zambia hasn't yet utilized.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us here on DW Africa Link podcast. But of course, we can't go without some final remarks from you as well, Kathy, our correspondent on ground.
It's just to say that over-borrowing, reckless borrowing from International Monetary Fund or the World Bank is actually bad. And we need to have mechanisms, strong mechanisms that will ensure that our borrowing as a country is monitored, and also that strict rules are put in place. Otherwise, the situation that we are in is really, really bad. So these are some of the lessons that we can learn going forward.
DW correspondent Kathy Short in Lusaka, and Dickson Mwansa, the program officer at the Josey Center for Theological Reflection, which works on economic justice issues and monitors conditions in communities.
Africa is changing. Don't get left behind. Tune in to Africa Link.
At the Africa Link podcast, we always look across the continent to see how the stories and issues we are dealing with play out, or at times even overlap. While Zambia's economy drastically slumped, the two small island economies of Seychelles and Mauritius rank first and second as the most attractive investment destinations on the continent, while the significantly larger economies of Egypt, South Africa, and Morocco rank in third, fourth, and fifth places, respectively. A report by Africa Development Bank said Africa dominated the list of the world's 20 fastest growing economies in 2024. In brief, all hope is not lost in Africa. That's it for this edition of Africa Link. Remember, you are not just a listener, but a crucial part of our community, and your engagement can shape the direction of our discussions. We value your insights and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. Please remember to follow so you can catch all of the Africa Link podcast episodes. This podcast was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabi. My name is Josey Mahachi. Thanks for listening. Until the next one, it's bye for now.